What's up everyone, we're back on the bench today with the TRX4M Bronco, and we've got something super exciting that I've been waiting for a really long time, and that is this really cool little scale interior set that we picked up from RCHUB. This thing is awesome. It's a two-part kit. I guess technically it's a four-part kit if you also include the inner fenders that we're going to be installing as well. There are a couple of things that I've heard people talking about this set, how it doesn't actually fit and you've got to do a ton of modification to make it fit. Well, that's because you have to get it with the inner fender set. The inner fender set has the mount points for the interior. They used to sell them together in a kit. It seems like that's going out of stock on Amazon and their website. I'm not really sure what's going on with that, but they do sell them individually online. You can pick up either a left-hand or right-hand side drive interior. I went with the left-hand side drive because I'm an American. This thing does seem to be 3D printed. It's a really high quality 3D print. It looks really nice. The level of detail on this is absolutely fantastic. We'll pull you in a bit closer and get some good detail shots on it. But I mean, we've got the full Bronco interior, looks fantastic. It does come with a tiny little fan to mount under the front right here in this little bracket that will blow some cool air over your motor, because it will essentially encase your motor and keep it really locked in tight there. Also comes with some stickers to emulate your dash and a little body clip type setup, because this rear section comes out so that you can change your battery out without having to take this whole thing out of the truck. So that's super convenient. Why don't we pull in a little bit closer? We'll take apart the TRX4M Bronco. We'll look at how everything's been holding up and we'll get it clean because it's a little bit dirty. And then we'll go ahead and reassemble it with our new RCHUB interior, see how it looks. It's really scale, really awesome, and I'm excited. I'm really excited to see how this turns out. Alright, so here's one of our inner fenders. These appear to be 3D printed as well. Possibly, well, they looks like they're injection molded. These are injection molded. These are really nice. These are really high quality. They seem to be fairly well made. They're not super flimsy, but they're also not very heavy, so they shouldn't add too much weight to the truck. Pretty excited to pop these in, so why don't we go ahead and pull this girl apart, starting with her body. Now she is a little bit dirty because I've been wheeling her around a bit, so why don't we go ahead and get her a little bit cleaned up, get the wheels and tires off, the suspension, because we are going to need to get access to this entire frame rail here. And so I think we're going to need to take some of this stuff off. And we are also going to take this thing a little bit further apart than you would think we would need to. That's for a specific reason, and we'll get into that when we get a little bit farther along. Now I'll spare you guys the absolute pleasure that's going to be watching me clean this truck off and take it apart. I know you've seen a TRX4M taken apart before. Oh look, we've got some of our faux mud stuck in the wheels. Huh, quite a bit of it actually, that's funny. Yeah, she's pretty dirty, so I'll go ahead and get the wheels, tires pulled off, get her cleaned up, and we'll just hit her with the old, oh, whoa, Jesus. Need to get this thing calibrated. So, as you can see, I have this a little bit farther apart than you would need to normally to install this kit, but that's for a few different reasons. This truck, I've decided, is going to be sort of the scale trail truck. It's going to be as close as possible to a scale truck. It's going to be the beauty queen, I guess you could call it. It's not going to be super competitive no matter what. This body is just pretty big and bulky. With the bumpers especially, you don't have a great approach or departure angle, so it's really never going to be a super competitive truck with this body on it. That being said, it looks absolutely gorgeous. The pro scale lighting, the details, everything on this body is absolutely awesome. So I'm gonna make this sort of the scale trail truck. That being said, it doesn't need to be super heavy. So we're gonna go ahead and take off the Injora brass skid plate, the Trail brass links, the Trail shocks, and Injora steel drive shaft. And we're gonna use those on a different project. And you may or may not have seen that yet. If you haven't, there's gonna be a little bubble right here. Go ahead and click on that. Check that project out. But those parts are gonna be much more useful with that project. So we're gonna go ahead and reinstall some of our lighter weight factory plastic parts for now. I might go with some of the aluminum pieces later down the road. We'll see how I feel about it. I think I am also going to leave most of the brass on the axles because I do want this truck to stay planted. I just want to take some weight out of the chassis because although it is plastic, this interior set is going to add a lot of weight very high up in the chassis. So let's go ahead and start reassembling our frame so that we can get everything mounted. Okay, so this is something to note. It looks like you can do this a couple of different ways. You can either start in the center here with your skid plate, motor transmission mount, sort of hold this in place, bolt one side in, do the other side, bolt that in, then mount your axles and your shocks, and then go ahead and finish up with your bumper mounts. Or you can start with your bumper mounts, but you have to put your shocks on first. I was gonna start with my bumper mounts because it seems like it'll be a little bit easier to hold everything together that way. But it looks like once you're bolted in place, it looks like you have to put the shocks on before you bolt this down one way or another. So, you know, let's go ahead and start with the skid plate, motor transmission. We'll just do that. Okay, here's something I wanted to point out that I just noticed as I was reassembling the front axle here. So this, another mark against the EcoPower 640T. This thing, I'm gonna replace it as soon as possible. I'm not happy with this servo at all. It is advertised as compatible with the TRX4M as long as you use the Samix brass servo mount. They specifically call out the Samix brass servo mount. I'm not sure if they have a partnership or something, but one thing I just noticed as I was putting this back together is that the back end of the EcoPower supplied little black aluminum either bolt-on or clamp-on servo horn that they supply with the kit, the back end of that was hitting on my center link mount and limiting my suspension travel. And it's due to this little squared off section at the back here where it's got the little meaty bit for the clamp on. The red Injora also has a little bit of a squared off section here at the back. It's not as pronounced as the one on the EcoPower because it doesn't clamp on. However, the bolt holes on the Injora don't line up real well with the Trail brass steering link. So, for the time being, I think I'm gonna go back to the stock one. It's the right length this way. It doesn't have any protruding square objects to catch on my steering or to catch on my center link mount. And unless it breaks, there's really no need to replace it. I imagine I'll probably strip it out at some point, at which case I will look for a suitable replacement. But for now, neither the EcoPower or the Injora can be recommended. All right, there's our suspension back together, and I gotta say it feels pretty weird putting stock parts back on, but I think for the purpose of this truck and for the look that I'm after, I think it's actually gonna be a much better choice. This looks much more factory, it looks much more OEM, and I think it's gonna look much more scale as well. I am gonna leave these Trail brass parts on the diffs and the steering for now because I do want it to stay planted. We are also, I think, gonna continue to run the Trail brass wheels. I could go with these factory Traxxas mud terrains, but these are no good. So I think we're gonna stick with the Trials and the crawlers that are on there. Let's go ahead and get the bumpers and bumper mounts back on, and then we can start wiring this truck back up and getting it back together. Alright, suspension and bumper mounts on. Man, that looks so good. That looks so good under there. This is how they should come from the factory. Come on, Traxxas. Alright, man, this set is so cool. So cool. So here's the front half of our cab. Super, super detailed. The interior looks awesome. You got the Bronco logo on the dash there, a little shifter, all these little independent parts. These are super cool. It looks like, this is pretty awesome too, there's a vent incorporated along the passenger side footwell. Not sure if you can see that right in here. And then also in here. And the fan will plug right into your ESC. So I am gonna go ahead and still run the Endura splitter. So this will plug into our other accessory port, and then I can plug the fan into this. I am not gonna run the rock lights on the Bronco anymore. That's gonna go in the other project. With the Pro Scale light bars and the headlights, as well as the rock lights, I felt like it was kind of just a lot. It was a lot of light. So instead of overloading this truck, we're gonna switch to the fan and the Pro Scale lights, and the fan I think just clips in. Looks like they've got some sort of 3D printed clip arrangement in here. You don't want to break anything. There were no instructions with this kit, so you kind of just have to guess where everything goes. It is pretty straightforward, pretty easy. So I don't imagine anyone having much difficulty. There we go. So yeah, your fan just clips right in there. And then I believe I should be able to run, yeah, perfect. Run my wire right in through there. And that'll allow us to blow some nice cooling air over the motor while it's encased in this little setup. There are a ton of mounting holes all over this chassis. So it's kind of confusing when you first look at it, but then it becomes very obvious as soon as you set the interior down on the chassis where everything goes. It comes with your mounting screws. I'm not sure, maybe for other models or for future use, they're gonna include some sort of things that screw on there. Not sure what those are for, but let's go ahead and get the front half of the cab in. Alright, there's the little GPS navigation and my dash in place. Now I thought about adding some detail to this interior with some paint, but there's no way that my paint skills would do this interior any level of justice. So we're gonna leave it as is. Okay, 6 screws, get the front cab tightened down onto the inner fender set here. It's Hex hardware included with this kit, which I really love to see. Everything is fitting together really nicely. I'm really liking how this kit is going together so far. Super impressed. Let's get the back half in. Okay, 2 more hex screws, puts the little rear body clip in place here over the receiver. You can still get to your easy set button, just barely. You might need to use a screwdriver or something to get to that, but you can still access that. I'm not gonna bother tidying up this wiring too much, as I think it's just gonna get covered up anyway, so I'm not really that worried about it. Let's see, plug our battery in. And let's see how the front half of the cab fits, or the back half of the cab rather. So it just kind of notches in the front there. Oh. See our little fan running. It's gonna keep our motor nice and cool. There's a lot of wiring to squish down in here. So Let's see if we can kind of move this around a little bit. The battery fits in there very nicely, mounts in the factory location just as it should. There's a little slot here in the base of your inner fender so that you can get to the tab that locks it in place. It's not the most convenient thing in the world to get to, but how often do you really have to change the battery in this thing anyway? Okay, it is the next day, and I would like to retract some of my previous statements about this kit. It's gorgeous, I'll give it that. It looks awesome. The fit is a different story. I have had to struggle with this thing for quite a while, doing a lot of trimming and modifying to make it fit just enough to be acceptable, in my opinion. It's been a struggle. I don't know if it's just this one in particular or if it's all of them, but it was not just a drop-in. Close, pretty close. I think this thing could definitely use some work. It's sort of a universal fit kit, so I understand that it's not gonna be perfect for everything. And I wonder which one it works in best, but I have actually managed to make it fit, and once it's in there, it looks amazing. So why don't we pull you in a little bit closer? We'll take a look at the overall fit and finish of this kit, how it all came together, what the final outcome is like, and then we'll go wheel it around and see what kind of effect this has made on the performance of this truck, because this is a trail truck and it's kind of more of a scale aesthetic focused truck at this point, but I still want it to perform well. So why don't we take it out on the trails, we'll take it out on the mini course, and we'll see how it performs. All right, let's take a look at this thing. So the front half of the cab fits relatively well. You can see the fan clips in place very nicely. You do have a little bit of space to run your wiring through there. The inner fender set bolts up pretty nicely. Everything lined up relatively well. The holes are very small, so I suppose you could drill them out a little bit, try to fit this thing a little bit better, but I don't think that's gonna help much. One thing that's very unfortunate that I noticed is when you put the body down on this, the little cross brace here that runs across to hold your body frame to the body itself and also hold your cowl section in place, those bars hit these inner fender. Now they had a little bit of a cutout for it, but it wasn't nearly enough and it wasn't in the right place. So I did have to spend some time trimming that out to get to clear these here. I did also have to trim the little tab that you zip tie your wiring to for the Pro Scale light kit. I had to trim that off. It was hitting the fan, and then had to reroute the wiring for the Pro Scale lighting through this kind of side panel of the body here to get everything to fit right back there. I then also there's some rails back here that they molded into the tops of the inner fenders that are supposed to guide the sides of the rear cab section down onto this so that it can latch into place. Unfortunately, it just didn't quite fit right, and so I had to trim those off in order for it to get to sit down. Now that's where we come to probably the biggest problem with this kit, the rear half of the cab that goes over the battery section. In the instructions, I did find some instructions on their Amazon listing. In those instructions, they say to remove your battery strap. Got to take that out. Got to ditch the battery strap, which is unfortunate. But okay, so I took that out. However, they do provide room for the battery strap, so I'm not sure what that's about. There's a little slot here so that you can use that, but okay, whatever. So I took it out. However, when you plug it in, the power plug doesn't clear the underside of this. I might still do a little bit of clearancing on the underside of this, but the problem is it's visible through this section here. So when you go to slide the rear half of the cab in, it still doesn't want to sit down. It's still hitting on something in there. I've been doing a lot of work clearancing some of these inner pieces here to try to get it to sit down, but I think it's just squashing the power plug with this section of the inside here. And like I said, I could try to clearance that out a bit, but it's visible through the rear of the cab there, which is unfortunate. Another problem is there's not really anywhere to run the wires for your Pro Scale lighting through this rear section once this is clipped down. if you can even get it to clip down. So what I've done, I'm running the splitter so that I can run the fan and the Pro Scale lighting. I've just run that splitter underneath this cross brace that's supposed to clip the rear half of the cab in, and that seems to have worked out for now. You can hear the little fan running in there. It works out pretty well. There is zero room underneath here for anything, so I can understand why you would want to get some fresh air blowing down on your motor, especially if you have an upgraded motor like I do. With that in place there, power plug in, go ahead and slip the rear half of the cab section in. So what I've done for now is just got it to fit well enough so that I can fit the body down over it. Go ahead and plug in our upper half, slide the rear half of the cab in place, and kind of just pop everything in, and there we go. There it is. It was sitting just a little bit low in the rear, so I added the little spring spacers that come from the factory, and I gotta say, I really like how this truck sits with the factory suspension reinstalled. Underneath it looks fantastic. I mean, that is how this truck should come from the factory. Absolutely, that is amazing. I love that look. Super scale, super cool. I did leave the brass on the axles so that this thing stays a little bit more planted, but with the added weight higher up in the cab and the factory suspension, we do get a much more scale look in terms of body roll and flex. So I'm super happy about that. This thing is going to be really fun to wheel around with my son on the mini crawler course. But for now, I'm super happy with how this thing performs. I probably will upgrade the links and maybe the skid plate again at some point. It doesn't really need those though. I mean, the truck performs really well as is. So why don't we come in? We'll take a little bit closer look at this interior, the inner fenders, how it all came together. I do need to tuck this wiring a little bit better up here for the Pro Scale lighting, but we'll get to that at some point. Let's take a look at this thing and then we'll hit the trail and see how it performs.